If you are out there and you are wondering how to amend your personal tax return, you've come to the right place. Stick around and I'll give you all the answers you need. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. How are you today? I hope you are doing fantastic. I'm doing marvelous, if you were to ask me. And if you are doing as superb as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka and let's roll. In today's conversation, I'm going to give you IRS Form 1040X line-by-line instructions how to amend your personal tax return. And if you made a mistake on your tax return or realize you missed out on a valuable tax deduction or credit, don't worry, don't panic. There is a solution. You can file an amended tax return to make the correction. And filing an amended tax return with the IRS is a straightforward process. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to give you guidelines for when and how to amend your tax return using Form 1040X. That's the key form here. Mistakes happen, folks, even on tax returns. So it's not the end of the world. Everything is fine. And even the IRS understands that. That's why they allow taxpayers to correct their tax returns if they discover an error on a return that's already been filed. Here is what you need to know about filing an amended tax return. First of all, let's define the whole topic here. Let's define the whole form. What is an amended tax return? To amend something basically means to change it, right? And that's exactly what you do when you file an amended tax return. You change your tax return to reflect what? To reflect new information. So filing an amendment may seem confusing because you must complete extra forms in addition to the original 1040. And anytime you need to change your filing status, income, deductions, or credit, you will need to file a 1040X amended tax return along with any forms or schedule that you are changing. And so basically the 1040X reports your original numbers as well as your new numbers along with a calculation of the difference between the two. And to file an amended return, you will need the original copy of your return and the new information that needs to be changed. This is kind of very important because if you want the IRS to actually process your amended tax return, they need to see the original return that was sent. Nowadays, we're very lucky that we live in the electronic age, so everything is digital. They can actually just have access to your data in a digital format. But there are people still in the country who file their tax returns manually, they file the paper return. So you got to understand the whole process before you file your amended tax return. Let's talk about timing. When do you need to file an amended tax return? There are times when you should amend your return and times where you shouldn't. Here are some of the most common situations that call for an amendment. And if you filed your taxes and then received another W-2 or other income statement, so let's say after you filed your taxes, you received a W-2 for a job you held for only a few weeks. The amount on the form may be just a few $100s, but it could still affect your tax. Or you received an interest statement for a bank account you had forgotten about, right? So the IRS basically expects you to report all of your income for the year. So in this situation, it's best to file an amended tax return. By law, employers and businesses are required to send all income statements such as W-2s and 1099 missed by January 1st or February 1st this year. And now we have 1099 NEC. So if you plan to file early, it's best that you make sure you've received all income statements before filing. If you missed claiming a credit or a deduction you are eligible to receive, right? You can also file an amended tax return. There are a number of credits and above the line deductions, the ones that you don't have to itemize to take, right? So there are a number of credits and above the line deductions that could help you lower your tax bill. So if you are eligible for one and don't claim it, you could be leaving money on the table. So filing an amended tax return could allow you to claim that money. Let me give you an example. If you paid, say, college tuition during the tax year, you could be eligible for the American Opportunity Tax Credit or the Lifetime Learning Credit. If you want to claim your educational credit after you've filed your 1040, you'll have to file an amendment. And another scenario where you need to file an amended tax return is your parents want to claim you as a dependent on their taxes, but you already claimed a personal exemption. So claiming a personal exemption, you went ahead and filed your taxes before your parents had a chance to file. But your parents want to claim you as a dependent on their taxes. So when you did your taxes, you failed to check the box on the 1040 that says you could be claimed as a dependent on someone else's taxes. So now your parents cannot claim you as a dependent on their taxes. So the thing here is that if your parents can claim you on their taxes and you agreed they should, you will need to file an amendment. You can also file an amendment if your employer made a mistake on your W-2 and had to send you a corrected document, right? People make mistakes and so do companies. So if the payroll department made an error on your W-2, it'll have to send you a corrected form. So when you receive the new W-2C, it will display the previously reported information next to the correct information to let you know what needs to be corrected. If the numbers changed and you already filed your return using the incorrect W-2, you will have to file an amendment. You can also file an amendment if you forgot to report income from a side gig, right? So let's say you worked a side gig but had no idea. You had to report the extra income on your federal income tax return. So you went ahead and filed your taxes, but after you received a CP2000 notice from the IRS alerting you that the information the IRS has on file doesn't match what you reported on your tax return, then you have to file an amended tax return, right? Because in this case, you may have underpaid your taxes. So the notice shows the side gig income that you forgot to report, and if the information in the CP2000 is correct, you don't need to amend your return unless you have additional income, credits, or expenses to report. So in this case, you agree with this notice, but also had expenses that need to be deducted. So you'll have to file an amendment. So to deduct your side gig expenses, you need to fill out a Schedule C for the side gig, and you need to file a 1040X. We've covered Schedule C on another show, so you might want to double check that. And you will also want to write CP2000 on top of your amended return, attach it to the response form, then mail it to the IRS. If you use the wrong filing status, you can also amend your return. Let's say you got married in November or October. So because you are single for most of the year, your spouse assumed that you would have to file separate returns using a single filing status. But the IRS considers you as married for the entire year as long as you were wed by December 31st of the tax year you're filing for. So you'll need to file an amendment to change your status, your filing status, and considering the tax advantages of being married, such as a higher standard deduction, you may actually be eager to file that amended return. And the last one that I just mentioned is that someone else has claimed your child on their tax return. This could be a scenario for filing an amended tax return also. You go to file your taxes and the IRS rejects your return because your ex, for example, or someone else has already claimed your child as a dependent. Of course, you and your ex cannot both claim your child as a dependent if you want to qualify for certain tax breaks like the child tax credit. You may have a divorce decree or custody agreement in place, but for IRS purposes, the parent who gets to claim the child as a dependent is typically the parents with whom the child lived for more than half of the year and who provided more than half of the child's support. So if you and your ex somehow can agree that you should be the one to claim your child as a dependent, your ex will need to file an amended return to remove your child as a dependent. If the two of you cannot agree, the IRS will apply something called tiebreaker rules when deciding who will get to claim the child. I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another section of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. We are still discussing here Form 1040X line-by-line instructions and how to amend your personal tax return. the big question here is that, is there a time limit for amending a return? It really depends. The IRS generally advises that you must file Form 1040X to amend a return within 3 years from the date you filed your original tax return, or within 2 years of the date you paid the tax, whichever is later. So you got to be sure to enter the year of the return you are amending at the top of Form 1040. Very important. If you want your amendment to be processed fast, you need to mention the year. If you missed the deadline, the IRS may not let you amend your return, and you could miss out on any deductions, credits, or tax benefits the amendment would have allowed you to claim. However, time periods for claiming a refund are suspended for a period when the IRS determines a taxpayer to be financially disabled because of a physical ailment or mental impairment. So you generally don't need to file an amended return if you discover math or clerical errors on a recently filed tax return, because the IRS has systems in place to actually to find those types of mistakes on its own, and if necessary, send you a bill for the additional tax due or a refund if the error was in your favor. So before filing an amended return, make sure the IRS has already processed the tax return you need to amend, right? If they don't have it in the system, they can't actually process the amendment. If they don't have the original tax return in the system, they cannot process an amendment. All right. So you want to make sure that the IRS can get your original return and amend return. You don't want the IRS rather to get those two mixed up. If you've already received your tax refund, then you know the IRS has already processed your return, right? Just keep in mind that the IRS limits the amount of time you have to file an amended return to claim a refund to within 3 years from the original filing deadline, as I said before, or within 2 years of paying the tax due for that year, if that date is later. And if you happen to be outside of that window, you cannot claim a refund by amending your return. You cannot. So now let's just dig a little deeper here. I'm going to give you line by line instructions here, all right, on how to actually fill the form. This is very important. So how do you fill Form 1040X? One thing, there are 3 steps. So first thing is you need to actually collect your documents. Number 2, you need to get the right forms. And number 3, you need to fill out Form 1040. Let's first talk about the first 2 steps. First step, collect your documents. You want to gather your original tax return and any new documents needed to prepare your amended return. If you need to correct the income you reported on your return, you may have a new or amended W-2 or 1099 form, okay? And if you missed claiming a tax return, a tax deduction or credit rather, you will need documentation to support the new deduction you are claiming, such as a receipt for a charitable contribution, new or amended Form 1098 mortgage interest statement, or Form 1098-T to claim an education credit. If you initially filed your tax return using TurboTax or Tax Act or H&R Block or in any other tax software, you can access your tax return online or print a copy of that return by logging into your account. If you didn't file using the tax preparation software and you cannot locate a copy of your return, you can order a copy of your tax transcript using the Get Transcript tool on irs.gov. So your transcript shows most of the lines from your tax return, including income, deductions, credits, and tax payments. So after collecting your documents, you need to get the right forms. Very important. So the IRS form for amending a return is Form 1040X. You will also need any forms that will be impacted by your change. For example, let's say you're changing your itemized deductions. You will also need a copy of Schedule A for that tax year. To amend your tax return to add additional interest or dividend income, you will need a copy of Schedule B. And the changes to revenues or expenses from a trade or business will require Schedule C and Schedule SA. So updating your capital gains and losses will also require Form 8949 and Schedule D, and so on and so forth. All right, so you get the point here. You can also prepare your amended return in a tax preparation software. So the thing is that to do this, you need to use the version of the tax software that applies to the tax year you need to amend. For example, if you need to amend your 2019 tax return, you'll need to use the 2019 version of that tax preparation software. It can be TurboTax, it can be H&R Block, it can be Tax Act, and so on and so forth. All right. And if you prepare your original tax return using tax software, again, just very simple. You just want to log into your account, open the tax return you already filed, and click on the link to amend your return. From there, the software will walk you through the process for filling the amendment. Very important. Okay, now let's move on to line-by-line instructions 1040. I'm showing you on the screen right now. You have the first section, the second section, the third section. So first section of Form 1040 is pretty straightforward. So you put your name, your first name, last name. If you put your social, you do the same thing for your spouse. If you are filing a joint return, you need to also put on top. You see where it says the return is for calendar year. You need to check the year for which you are filing the amendment. All right, and if it's not 2019, 18, 17, 16, then you put you need to put, it has to be one of those four. Yeah. And if there is another year, you have to put the calendar year, so the fiscal year or calendar year. And you need to put you actually need to check your filing status. Very important. You don't forget to check whether you have a full year healthcare coverage. And you need to also put so this is for the first session, so that's the intro. And then you scroll down, you have the income and deductions. This is where you actually have to put, again, if you remember, you have three columns here. You have the original amount, the net change, and the correct amount. So you need to make sure you do this for your adjusted gross income, your itemized deductions, line 3. You have to, so it's pretty straightforward. And then you get to line 5 to your taxable income. And then your tax liability. So you need to actually put the credits if you have other taxes, and same thing for every scenario. You have to put the original amount, the net change, and the correct amount. What about payments? Moving on to payments here, you have federal income, line 12, line 13, the estimated tax payments, line 14, your EIC, your earned income credit, and for line 15, you actually put any refundable credits that you are expecting, and you put the appropriate form here. Line 16, you have the total amount paid with the request for extension of time to file, tax paid with original amount, and additional tax paid if the return was filed. And on line 17, you put the total payments. So you need to add lines 12 through 15 and line 16. And the third part is you need to put the refund or amount you owe. And this is basically based on whether you overpaid or underpaid. And you can also decide whether you want the amount you want to be refunded to you, or if you want part of it to be applied to your to another year. Okay. And then on part 3, you have to put in some explanation. You have to attach any supporting documents and new or changed forms and schedule. So you need to actually explain why you're filing an amendment. And you sign, you put your dates, you put your occupation, you do the same for your spouse. And if you pay someone to actually do the work for you, you also need to put their name and their PTI. And PTI is very important. This is the professional tax identification number. All right. So once you have all that, you need to submit your amended forms, right? And beginning with the 2019 tax year, you can actually e-file amended tax returns. So if you use tax preparation software to prepare the Form 1040, just follow the software's instructions to e-file the attachment. Now, if you need to amend a return for 2018 or earlier, you'll need to print Form 1040X and any other forms you are amending. So you need to also attach any necessary supporting documentation, such as a new or amended W-2 or 1099 form, other forms or schedules that changed, such as Schedule A if you updated your itemized deductions, your CP 2000 notice if you are amending your tax return because of a notice you received from the IRS. You need to mail all the forms and documents to the address provided in the instructions. Now, the thing here is that if amending your tax return results in a higher tax bill, you will need to make an additional tax payment. So for an e-filed amended return, you can make a payment electronically through the software. Otherwise, you can mail a check with the amendment. By making a payment now instead of waiting for the IRS to send you an invoice, you can actually minimize the interest and penalties you will owe. So you want to keep in mind that if you file an amended tax return on paper rather than e-filing, it can take the IRS 8 to 12 weeks to process that amendment. So you can check the status of your amended return using the IRS. The IRS has the agency has a where is my amended return page, and that's pretty cool. And wait about 3 weeks from the date you mailed your return for the information to show up in the IRS system. Okay, now what else do you need to, one thing you also need to think about is that if you owed a lot of taxes or received a large refund, you may want to update your withholding. You can use, you can actually make sure that you don't actually overpaid, or you don't have too much money taken out of your paycheck, right? Or too little money. And if you amend your federal income tax return, you'll likely also need to file an amended tax return with your state. Each state has its own form to amend a tax return, right? So this is very important. And what else do you need to know about filing an amended tax return? If you just make sure, and I'm just going to close here. I'm going to close on this. Be sure to sign and date the form. Very important. You need to attach any required forms that support your amendment to the 1040X. So you want to also make sure that you explain the reason for amending the return on Form 1040 Part 3 I just showed you. And if you use software or an online service to prepare your 1040X, you'll have to print a copy to mail. It's probably a good idea to print a second copy to keep for your own records. All right, folks, this is it for today's conversation. I want to thank you for your attention. I was talking to you today about IRS Form 1040X, and I was giving you line-by-line instructions, and I covered what an amended tax return is, when you need to file an amended tax return, whether there is a time limit for amending a return, how do you file an amended tax return, and what else do you need to know about filing an amended tax return. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will see you next time, but until then, remember, stay marvelous.